Hi, I'm Jana.
Hi everyone, I'm Simon and welcome to the Rooted in Dirt HQ. In these conversations we're going to be discussing things related to trail and ultra running performance, and today we're going to be discussing wizard sticks. Do we need them? And we hope that you find it informative.
This is very much a conversation, so please feel free to get involved. We'd love your thoughts, your comments. Yeah, leave your feedback, please.
And if you do like the conversation, then please, I have to say this because we're on social media now, please like and subscribe, hit the bell so that you are alerted when we next post a conversation.
It'll be worth it. All right, Simon. Today we are talking about wizard sticks,
Hiking poles?
hiking poles, cheat sticks, some might say. Um, we did not have these. Neither of us owned a pair, a set, a pair, a set. Not sure. Um, and earlier this year, in May, you decided you wanted to give them a crack at Ultra-Trail Snowdonia.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I entered Ultra-Trail Snowdonia, which is a 56, I mean there's a 100 miler as well. Maybe I'll do that one day when I'm big and strong, but I entered the 56 kilometer, almost 3,500 meters of elevation gain and loss race. And I thought to myself, this is probably the start of wanting to do some longer trail races. This is sort of the entry into maybe longer distance stuff, having done sort of marathon distance and sub-marathon distance for most of my running journey up until now. And because Ultra-Trail Snowdonia has such a lot of climbing, but also because if you look at the course profile, there's literally 4 distinct climbs. They sequenced very evenly throughout the race, and they're similar height each climb. You're doing 3 to 6 kilometers of horizontal distance with somewhere between 600 to 1,000 meters of elevation gain per climb. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to try using poles the first time, especially now that we live in Europe and we've got big mountains on our doorstep and we want to start doing longer, more mountainous stuff. So yeah, took the plunge. Thank you to you for buying them for me, and friends and family who chipped in. They're not cheap, so yeah, it was a good experience trying to use them for the first time.
And so, some people refer to them as cheat sticks, like we said. What made you decide that this was going to be the race that you choose to use them?
Yeah, so I think I was quite worried about mechanical fatigue or fatigue resilience. Those of you who watched the post UTMB or listened to the post UTMB narrative about fatigue resilience, it sort of dominated the airwaves, but it's something that's really real in trail running. It's a big limiting factor. The longer you go, the more that mechanical fatigue, muscle and neuromuscular fatigue plays an impact on your performance. So being that it was my longest race, being that it had so much vertical elevation gain and loss, I thought it's time to try and use them to see if I could get any muscle sparing, and hopefully still be moving quickly towards the end of a long race. I knew that it would take me at least 7 hours to complete the race, so I knew it was going to be a long day out, and it was the perfect opportunity to try.
And you smashed the race. You
Yeah, I was happy with the
you
result.
got a top 15 result. I take it that you had a positive experience with the poles.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first climb out of Llanberis, which is the village where the race starts, is on road to start, and then it becomes trail. And literally before we even hit the trail, I had my poles out. Most of the people around me had their poles out, and I was thinking, I've made the right choice here. Like, no one's messing around here. They've all got their wizard sticks. So Yeah, it was a really positive experience. I think the first climb is the most runnable climb, even though it's the second most elevation gain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most runnable climb, not only because you're fresh, but it's quite wide trails and like not a lot of steps and stuff. It's just like a gradual drag up to the almost to the top of Snowdon. So that was really good. I did predominantly diagonal stride technique, so sort of one pole plant for every step forward and just almost like an exaggerated walk. But I ran most of that climb. I wasn't always striking 1-to-1. I was sometimes doing one pole strike for every two steps,
Mm-hmm.
just because when you're running, it's difficult to keep pumping your arms that frequently. So there was a bit of variability in how I approached that. The next three climbs, I double poled basically the whole way up. So two poles out in front of you, and because it's so steep, you're just planting them into the ground in front, and then propelling yourself up the mountain. And again, sometimes sort of one pole per stride, so two steps and a pole, but sometimes one pole every two strides. It depends a lot on the ground that you're striking on, that kind of thing. So really positive experience going up the hills.
Mm-hmm.
I think it helped me massively. Going down, we sort of originally planned, because I didn't want to faff with the poles too much.
Yeah.
And I was worried, just taking them out and putting them back in and all of those things. So going down the hills, I told myself I'm not going to use them at all. I didn't use them on the first descent, and I was saying before we started recording, I ran with Elsie Davis down the first descent. She almost got lost. Actually, she thought the aid station was there. I was like, no, it's still further down. So I'm taking that one. The first descent's quite runnable, and I felt comfortable not using the poles. But then on the second and third descents, there was this guy that I was dovetailing with the whole day, and
Mm-hmm.
I overtook him on every climb, and he overtook me on every down, and he was using his poles going down. My stubbornness got the better of me, so I said I'm not going to use them or whatever. And then on the final climb, I decided, when I overtake this guy, I'm going to keep my poles out.
He's not catching me
and
again.
He's not going to catch me. Like, I need to put the hammer down. And kept the poles out, and they actually helped massively on the final downhill as well. I was struggling with quite a lot of anterior knee pain at that point. My muscles were tired, and so just being able to put the pole down before planting my foot just helped to reduce the pain and the fatigue in the muscles. And that was my fastest descent other than the first descent. So I descended faster in the last climb than I did in descent 2 and 3. So I think I learned a lesson that there are times where you can use them for downhill running as well, obviously depending on the conditions and the trail. But overall, really positive experience. I will definitely be using them in mountainous trail and ultra-trail races moving forward.
I think we're going to have to find a balance between how technical we get in these conversations, right? And I think it would be great to hear from you all. To what extent would you like us to expand upon the research insights that we share throughout the week on social media? But let's say in short, why would it help to use poles going downhill? Because you're just freewheeling, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. But vertical ground reaction forces are much higher when you're descending, because you've got the force of gravity acting against you constantly. And so the forces acting through the foot and therefore up into your legs are quite high. So the impact is high. But during downhill running, you've also got eccentric muscle contractions, which are highly disruptive to muscle fiber tissue. And they are, I don't want to say cause, because someone's going to take offense to that, but I would say they are, causing exercise-induced muscle damage, EIMD. And exercise-induced muscle damage is what ruins many, many ultra-trail marathons. It's unavoidable in some ways, but we can try and delay that as long as possible. And poles certainly can help you. So the average foot force when you use poles is diminished in uphill running. It's diminished by about 5%. Now, you might not think 5% is a lot, but if you add that over tens of thousands of steps over the course of a race, it's quite dramatic. So, and that's just in uphill conditions. I imagine it's even more in downhill conditions. So I think they help, a lot. We have an athlete, George, who commented on some of our videos or some of our posts this week. And thank you, George, for doing that. Who used poles as well for the first time in the Brecon Beacons for an ultra this weekend. Who's been struggling with some anterior knee pain, runner's knee. You probably all know what that feels like. And he also found that the poles really help to alleviate sort of pain and stress around the knee joint. So I think they can be a massive help, not only in the uphills but the downhills as well.
Awesome. You spoke about 1-to-1 ratio, double planting the poles, 1-to-2 ratio. It sounds quite technical. So to what extent did you look up technique beforehand? To what extent does it feel intuitive when you're running? What do I do with these things? What do you think people need to know about that?
So, and thank you to Colin as well. Colin also mentioned on Instagram that that's a barrier. Like seeing these poles as like this sort of scary thing that if I don't know how to use them in a very technical way, then I'm not going to get a benefit from them. And certainly the research that has been done in this area usually uses experienced trail runners who have probably years of experience of using poles. So when we say, there's this benefit from the research, there are questions around whether sort of novice or beginner pole users are still going to get that same benefit. I found the benefit, and I'm very much a novice. So what I did was, I watched the Harrier videos before I went out. I just about put a balaclava on because I didn't want to embarrass myself running around like the local hills here with my poles. I did some research about sort of the height that they should be, where my hand should go, how I use the straps to guard my wrists and give me extra support. But in reality, nothing is going to prepare you more so than going out and using them.
Yeah.
It's why in our decision matrix that we put on Instagram, the very first question that we ask is, have you practiced with them?
Yeah.
Because practice makes perfect. When I started, I did a lot of the diagonal stride technique because the gradients were quite, around here they're quite moderate. But then when I went out to the Brecon Beacons to practice, I was using double pole, and that transition from sort of diagonal stride technique into double poling, I definitely think when you transition from running to hiking, when the trails start to get really steep, it happens quite organically.
Yeah.
But you're only going to get that feel once you get out in the mountains and try. So the first step is to buy the poles or borrow from a friend, and then just go and use them and try and get used to them.
On that, if you're borrowing the poles, I'm looking at them here. Can I borrow them from any friend, a friend who's double my height? What are the kind of things that you need to think about and be aware of when you go either into a shop or online when you're considering poles? What can we share?
Well, you're the tech guru in this rooted in dirt relationship, so you did all the heavy lifting when it came to choosing poles. I think the only thing I said to you is that I don't want it to be a faff. Like, I want it to be as easy as possible. If I could have just had like a wizard staff, two of those, I probably would have said that's best. But I didn't want to have literally two giant poles like hanging off my back. So I think we went with ones that can just snap into position, so they do fold away. Quite simple just to put together. So you're running on the trail, and that. And it took me about 10 seconds per pole to get it out of my pack, get it set up, and I could hold this one while I was setting the other one up. So this was really nice because it just snaps into position, and it's really easy to take down as well. So get to the top of my climb, I got it like that, and stubbornly put it back into my pack. That means that that's not adjustable in terms of the length, so it's a fixed length. We did some measurements before I went up for my first practice run. What the research suggests is that around 58% of your standing height seems to be a good length for the pole. But a lot of the experienced trail runners that are studied in the literature report having higher heights than that, so almost up to 70% in the sort of mid 60s. So I would say, although this was really good because it was just easy to snap into position, you obviously can get poles that you can adjust the height. So you can imagine if you're going up something really steep, then you're going to want to reduce the height of the poles because you don't want your arms to be way up above you as you're trying to double pole up the hill. And then if you're on something sort of gradual or going downhill, you might want a longer pole. So those are the things I would take into account if I had like all the money in the world, but I think you understand maybe the cost implications better than I do.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing just to add there also is it has to do with both your height but also the angle of your elbow, right? So depending on how long your arms are, you might not have standard proportions in terms of how high, how tall you are and sort of where that angle is. I think the other thing to consider would be the composition of the pole. So they come typically in either they're carbon poles or they're aluminium poles. And I think there are two implications. Carbon poles are lighter, they are more expensive, but they are also easier to snap because they're quite rigid, they don't bend. Aluminium poles, on the other hand, are easier to get your hands on because they are just priced more accessibly, they're cheaper, they are more robust because they bend, they won't immediately snap, which means that you can use them on more terrain, more variety of terrain than you would potentially choose to use the carbons. However, they are heavier.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, like in the literature, looking at dozens of runners, when using poles versus not using poles after a long competition or simulated time trial, people who use poles are actually more economical, so they have a lower cost of running, vertical cost of running, than people who don't use poles. So you might think, oh, it's heavy, so my heart rate's going to be higher, or there's going to be higher ventilatory cost or whatever. That's actually the opposite case. So I wouldn't let the fear of a couple of grams on like a cheaper pole put me off going for that pole, especially if I was using it for the first time. Like I would go with something that I know I'm going to actually use that is robust and start there, and then once you've got the hang of it, maybe you could try something more expensive.
I'd say just a ballpark for the cheapest poles you can get your hands on probably sit at around £60, whereas the top of the range you're probably looking at somewhere between £200 and £250 at the very, very top end, sort of brand name high spec ones.
That's like one pair of alpha flies, so it's not that,
right?
Not that much. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
If there is anything that we haven't spoken about that you would like to know about, poles, wizard sticks, cheat sticks if you still think so, please feel free to let us know. We can address that on our socials going forward. And also, if there are other things that you would like us to discuss, then let us know. We'd love to have this conversation with you.
And yeah, we did come up with a bit of a cheat sheet, a decision tree matrix just around deciding whether you should use poles in your next trail race. So if you'd like a copy of that, it is on our Instagram. Alternatively, you can leave a comment below and we'll make sure to get that to you. We hope that you found today informative. We do aim to do a few more of these. We will do not a launch, but we'll give you a little bit more insight into what we're doing and why we're doing it in a future episode. But for now, we'll leave it there, and thanks for your time and happy trail running.
Thank you. Chat soon.